In this video, I'm going to cover basically building a couple of handles. And the handles will serve two functions. One is they'll be the old proverbial oh shit handle. I think if there were ever a car that deserves a good oh shit handle, it's probably going to be this one. You know, thinking of being a passenger in a car like this, you're going to want something firm to hang on to, just for comfort, you know. And I know a lot of people put the handle on the dash here, and that's fine. It works well in some situations. With my dash, that integrating that handle into that dash was a little challenging cosmetically. I actually had a couple of versions rendered in CAD, and it looked okay, but ultimately I decided to actually move the handle position to here. So I'm going to do a couple of handles that bolt in directly to this piece here. I know that sounds a bit odd, but I'm thinking on how these are going to be used, primarily getting in and out of the car. The last thing you want people to do is to grab onto the windshield and use that as leverage to get in and out. So I'm hoping by having a handle here that will replace the need for that other additional grab point on the windshield. Also, it's I think a nice comfortable place to grab during driving if you're, you know, little unsure what's coming up. Not for me, I got the wheel, but for passenger, they're going to want something kind of solid to grab onto. So there are two things that are going to allow this design to integrate with what's going on. First of all, I'm not going to be introducing any new materials. I'm not adding painted metal. I'm not adding stainless steel or brushed aluminum. I'm going to build these two handles to exactly mimic the steering wheel. So it's going to be a wood steering. You know, I'm using the Factor 5 wood steering wheel. These will look just like a section of that steering wheel, and I believe the steering wheel is a mahogany or a mahogany-like wood. I know there's probably several of you out there that know exactly what kind of wood it is, but the reality is it is a mahogany style or type wood. And so sorry about all the talk here, and let's push this forward and get right into building of these handles. Well, I'm getting ready to start building a couple of grab handles. These are the oh crap handles that people like to be able to grab in cars like this. So these are the wooden frames, the steel portion of the handle. It'll be encapsulated in wood, and you'll kind of see that unfold, but would have been nice if I'd had enough metal to cut the entire piece. This is, I think, 3/16, quarter inch. Trying to use up the scrap that I have without having to buy any more stock. So unfortunately, I was not able to cut this piece out of one unit. So next best thing is I carved it up out of some parts. Got a nice deep V. So when I weld these up, should be plenty strong enough. This handle is the steel's a bit of an overkill for this handle, but I'm doing it for both cosmetic reasons and heavier stock's a little easier to weld and a little easier to work. So here we go.
Here's that canary wood I was talking about earlier. I believe the stock I had was in 4/4, so I needed to get it down to a 1/2 inch, which would allow me to laminate it onto either end of that steel spline. In the end, giving me, after I kind of finished the working of it, giving me that nice kind of 3/4 to 7/8 inch handle grip. I start off with tracing it and then rough sawing it with the bandsaw. From there I go to a router and a belt sander. After cutting this wood, you can really see why they call it canary wood. What's kind of hard to see in this video is that the grain pattern is actually very similar to mahogany, which is what I was rambling on earlier about. So I need to screw these steel splines onto the wood so I can route each shape to match that spline. The splines are exactly kind of where I want them as far as handle shape goes, so the wood just needs to match them. Those holes in the steel will ultimately be where I run pegs through the handle to add strength. So those notches I cut out earlier were to receive the threaded studs. So here I'm welding them in place. I'll grind those top surfaces smooth so I'm able to laminate the handle on either side of those. But this is how they affix to the car frame. I'm likely going to end up bolting them from up underneath, but that actually remains to be seen.
Well, here's the roughed out piece of steel. Actually, it's not going to get much cleaner than this. The edge will get cleaned up when I do a final sanding. But you can tell this gets sandwiched in here like this. Kind of like how the steering wheels are made. And then once it's all glued up, there'll be a nice radius over it. I'll probably put some dowels, some very thin dowels across just to strengthen it up even further. But yeah, looks like we're getting there. This is intentionally rough. This will give the glue a little bit more purchase on the steel. I've done this before and it grabs onto it pretty well. So next step is to laminate this piece. Yeah, well, this is always the best part when you take all the clamps off of a big glue up. I used polyurethane glue, so it's a messy, super messy glue and kind of expands everywhere, but it's good at bonding metal to wood and vice versa. So let's see how it goes, but I'm gonna start taking clamps off. Hopefully I don't see anything spring out of place.
Yeah, so lots and lots of sanding on this. Hey, for those of you who have noticed, yes, that is a much larger motor on my Harbor Freight cheap sander that I bought. Put a bigger work surface on it and added a 1.5 horsepower motor to the back of that thing. It's huge, looks ridiculous, but works really, really well. And I had the motor, belts lined up, and now I can pretty much grind through anything. So kind of a cheap solution. It puts a smile on my face every time I use this thing. After I sanded the wood to meet the steel spline, the next step is to put that radius on both sides, actually all four sides, to create the handle basically. So I'm using a 1/2 inch radius bit, bearing bit, top bearing bit. This is the most volatile procedure actually of this whole operation, which kind of stinks that it's at the very end. So if I mess up, I got a lot of work going right in the garbage. But luckily it worked out well. I used a brand new bit, super sharp. That's kind of the key here, and slow, consistent feed rates. I was right at the edge of burning the wood as I was feeding this through, but better to burn it a little bit than to kind of blow it out. But in the end, it worked out great, and did a finger count at the end and kept all my fingers, which is also another risk when you're routing thin pieces like this. Not a lot of surface area to kind of clamp down on, and these can be a little unstable. So your fingers can take the brunt of those mistakes for sure. But all in all, went great. And next step is to start the hand sanding, which is not a short process. Yeah, I'm finishing up the sanding here. It took a while. The wood's very dense and it's difficult to sand. The next step was to apply some stain. Actually, it's a dye to the wood. I used an alcohol-based dye, which allowed me to apply multiples of thin coats to really sneak up on that Factory 5 steering wheel color. After that, it's time for the epoxy. I chose a brush-on 2-part epoxy, and it's self-leveling, so it, at least around the top surface and the sides, I knew it would be nice and smooth and easy to sand. I also knew at the same time I'd get a lot of drips in the bottom. So understanding that I'd be doing a lot of secondary finishing work on this part, I think epoxy was still the right choice because it allowed me to do a really quick build coat and a very, very durable coat. Probably the most, well, it is the most durable finish you can put on top of wood. And knowing how these are going to be used, handles gripping onto, and just the abuse they're going to see, it seemed to be the right material. I suspect that's what the steering wheel is coated in as well.
Well, here's what it looks like as the epoxy's curing. I use the system 1, 2, 3. Used it in the past, works great. Goes on nice and thick. One coat is all it'll need. I don't mind a few drips in the bottom. Those can be sanded off and are invisible. They just need to be nice to the touch. So let's hope this sets up nicely, and we'll see how it goes. Pretty happy with the match on the steering wheel color. Took quite a few attempts with the stain. I used a alcohol-based dye to kind of tame that canary wood, but it's almost a dead match with the steering wheel. After it's cured up, we'll see how they look.
I'll show you what they look like in the car. Boy, it would be nice to get that steering shaft in, that's for sure. But they're gonna go here and here. Something like that. Still working on kind of the final space, but they'll bolt through this. You know, what I'm trying to figure out, the reason I actually haven't put the holes in there yet is I'm gonna see if I can still get to them with the transmission in place, because these are obviously going to go in after the one of the last things to go in after the tunnel cover goes in. So I'm still working out those details, but in any event, this is how they go, and they're in a nice comfortable spot to help you in and out. I kind of mocked up something and pretended like I was a passenger, and they actually quite nice, a nice aid to get in and out of the car. So that's one of their big functions. And then of course a grab handle while we're driving.